you miss me? I've been out of it comatose, but the depression.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Burns, the weekly hobbyless podcast from me, your host, Andrew Burns, or SlowBurne from Wildfire Gaming. Back after a couple of weeks this week. Last episode we had my wife Reagan on talking about Skyrim. That had definitely been taking up a lot of our time, and that was definitely a big part of the reason that the uploads kind of started to slow with Controlled Burns. But um, I think I'm kind of a little bit over the the Skyrim hump as well. I mean, if you've been into the Skyrim hump, you know what I mean. Like you it just totally absorbs everything that you're kind of doing in your free time. But Reagan finished the game, and I had my character. I didn't finish the game with him. I still might go back to him here and again, but since then we've actually kind of moved on to more nostalgic games. Reagan and I played through Sonic Adventure. We also played through Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelist of the Roses on the PlayStation 2. We started with Sonic Adventure 2. We played a little bit of the herbs. It just sometimes when you're a gamer that's in your late 20s and early 30s like we are, I think it is natural to kind of go through these phases where you're kind of nostalgic for the games that you played as a kid. It doesn't always have to be something new, something high tech, something that is kind of associated with modern consoles. So I had a really good time digging up um, some of my old consoles, digging out the Wii, which is what we played the GameCube games on, digging out the PlayStation 2 and taking that for a spin. And it's just fun to do that every now and again. Now since then, last night we actually Reagan started God of War 2018. I had kind of showed her the cutscenes for the older God of Wars because those are definitely not her bag, but I wanted her to at least see the evolution of that character of Kratos. And it's actually been a bigger hit than I even expected. Starting the 2018 game, she's super into Atreus, she's super into Freya, and so that's probably what we're gonna kind of be more focused on going forward. So it's kind of back to regularly scheduled program as far as we're concerned. And so hopefully that means that I'll kind of get back to a more regular schedule with Controlled Burns. And I was just looking at the history here. I think what is this? Is this episode 38 of Controlled Burns? Yes, it is. It's really interesting because we are coming up just a couple of weeks away from basically our 1 year anniversary. My first upload for Controlled Burns, my introductory podcast, which was very brief, just kind of an introduction to the show, was on October 2nd, 2024. So we are coming right up on that anniversary. It's been a very interesting experience to upload and record these podcasts. Definitely led to me reconnecting with some people, like my friend Wesley, and we did the roller coaster podcast. That was a lot of fun. Having Brett on, my cousin Brett, to do the NFL predictions. I enjoyed, of course, having an outlet to discuss many various aspects with my wife Reagan. Having my brother Brandon on a couple of times to talk about his top 25 video games. That was a lot of fun. Having my neighbor Chase come on to talk about his top 25. That was a really interesting experience. So, and of course, my roommate Sean, who is the co-founder of Wildfire Gaming. So I've really enjoyed that aspect the most, I think, is just interacting with different people. But of course, we have some solo episodes as well where we do some listing, and that's what we're in for this week. And I think part of going back to those nostalgic consoles kind of made me think about, I was particularly playing Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelist of the Roses, really made me think about underrated video games. And then I kind of shifted that language to make it underappreciated video games because it really could mean a lot of different things. An underrated video game would be one that is not held in the level of esteem that you would think. Maybe it's considered a bad game, and when you actually think it's a good game, or it's considered a middling game, and you think you should be considered a great game. But underappreciated is kind of a broader term because that could also encompass games that just didn't hit on a wider level that you think should have, or games that you've played that just not a lot of other people have that you think are really great. And so I kind of combined both of those things together to create this list of 25, 26 with an honorable mention games that I have played and completed over the course of my life that I think are overlooked, some cases underrated, some cases underappreciated, that I think that you should check out if you're a fan of the medium. So it should be an interesting list. I did not write any notes or anything for this, just other than the games themselves. So it's going to be a little bit of a freewheeling conversation, but I hope you'll enjoy it, especially if you're a fan of any of these games or are looking for something a little bit different to play rather than the latest blockbuster or indie hit. Um, so just a reminder, this is Controlled Burns, a weekly hobby list podcast with a particular focus on lists and topics related to video games, music, TV, and film, as well as other hobbies and aspects of pop culture. If you're interested in writing into the podcast and having your comments or questions read on air, you can at controlledburns with an ES at gmail.com. Now, before we get into the list, I want to say that I'm a little bit surprised that it took me this long, almost to the 1 year anniversary, to do a ranking of my underappreciated video games because actually finding and highlighting underappreciated games is actually one of my favorite aspects of ranking. I think it's part of the reason that I enjoy ranking so much is because it's very interesting to see kind of these underdogs go up against like the Titans. Everybody knows Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the greatest games of all time, or The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2. Um, but it's really interesting whenever you play something like some of the games that we have on this are going to discuss here on this list, and you consider them maybe not on the level of those, or maybe in some cases you do consider them on the level of those, or it's just slightly below, and I have, of course, my top, or not even top, just my ranking of all of the games that I've ever finished, and that's 316 games by my current count. Actually, I think it should be 317, so I'll just make a little edit there. But that is a lot of games, right? And I've picked out 25. These are obviously not my top 25 games of all time because many of my top 25 games are extremely highly rated, like Bloodborne or Final Fantasy VII or um, you know, uh, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Red Dead Redemption 2, Witcher 3, Last of Us. But there are a surprising number, I would say, of games that are in my top 25 or close to my top 25, or just games that I've enjoyed over the course of my life that you never really hear a lot of discussion about, or you hear them in discussions and they're maybe not appropriately considered. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Just highlighting some games that I think deserve more love, deserve more appreciation, recognition. And we're going to start here with the honorable mention here. This is the only one where I was like, I mean, it's pretty well appreciated, but I think it kind of runs the risk of being a little bit forgotten in the annals of time. And that is Jak and Daxter, the original Jak and Daxter from Naughty Dog, their first game post the Crash Bandicoot era. Jak and Daxter was the first, I would say, PlayStation 2 game that I ever played that really blew me away. I had played some early PlayStation 2 games before that. Star Wars Racer Revenge was the first PlayStation 2 game I ever played. I definitely also played Star Wars. There were so many Star Wars games back then, so I played Star Wars Super Bombad Racing, which was not very good. Kart Racer. I played the first Spider-Man game, so the one that was sort of based off of that first Tobey Maguire film. And I actually remember seeing Jak and Daxter in the store and noticing that it was developed by Naughty Dog. Even as a kid, I was able to pick up on that, and I recognized that Naughty Dog was the developer of Crash Bandicoot, and I had enjoyed the Crash Bandicoot games on the PlayStation 1, particularly Crash Team Racing. But I don't know. There's something, I think what might have set me against it was actually a demo because if you grew up around that time, you know that there was a lot of demos that you could play when you would go to retailers, and I think this was just in a Walmart. There was a demo of Jak and Daxter, but I think the demo was the fish catching minigame, which is such a minute part of that game, a 1 to 2 minute experience, and that was basically my whole understanding of what the game was. And I was like, well, I'm not interested in this crap, and it moved right along. But actually, my friend Cade, who was just like S tier in terms of introducing me into great video games, he really had a great taste in games, and he introduced me to a lot of my favorite games when I was a kid. He brought over his PS2 with Jak and Daxter one day, and I couldn't believe how awesome it was because I had grown up obviously playing Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, maybe another game that we're gonna discuss here in a minute. But platformers in the PlayStation One, the Disney stuff, for sure. And but Jak and Daxter was on a whole of the level of those. The fact that the whole world was interconnected just was mind blowing to me. The fact that you could see things in the distance and actually go there. It's kind of the first time that I ever had that experience. An experience that a lot of people associate with like an Oblivion or a Skyrim. And I really liked the atmosphere of the game. The it wasn't a big storyteller, but it definitely had a little bit more going on than a lot of platformers at that time. And just how everything was so interconnected and full of, and to me, mystery. It was like this world to explore. And the game came with a map, and you had the map of the world that you could track your progress on. It was so great. The only reason that I don't have Jack and Daxter higher on this list because I think it's an amazing game, certainly one of the greatest platformers of all time, and I think that's why I have it on this list because I don't know that it is often considered like a top five platformer ever made. But at the same time, I think that there are a lot of really diehard Jack and Daxter fans. It is a beloved game for those that have played it, generally. So I didn't quite, it didn't quite make the list, but I wanted to kind of highlight it as an honorable mention. So Jack and Daxter, before we actually get into the meat of the list. At number 25, this is a game that was kind of an interesting one. It's an example of a game that was rated highly, but maybe not appreciated to the level that it should have been. And that's Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation 5. Came out in 2023. Um, I think the reason that I consider it to be underappreciated is I do think that it is the best of the Spider-Man games. I think it's actually the best by a noticeable degree. Whereas I hear a lot that it's either people consider it to be the worst one or certainly below the first one. Maybe some people consider it to be above Miles Morales, but I think in terms of storytelling, it was significantly higher than those. Spider-Man 1, was kind of laying things out and it was good. I think a lot of people attribute the quality of the story to the ending. And the ending is good. And I understand that the villain is is well developed and he's done very well. But in Spider-Man 2, I would argue the same for the villain. The main, I guess there's a couple of main villains in Spider-Man 2, but certainly the main villain, which is obviously Venom, I think has done extremely well. I do understand the criticism that it was a little bit expected. There wasn't a lot of shocking developments over the course of that story. But I would argue that there were not a lot of shocking developments over the course of the story of Spider-Man 1 or Miles Morales either. And then just on a gameplay level, it was so obviously better. I mean, they just built on top of what they had. They had so many more moves that you could execute. Obviously, you were able to play as both Peter Parker Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man, so that kind of doubled the variety right there. And just in terms of the variety in the world, the side quests were way better than they were in either of the previous two Spider-Man games. You didn't have it to do as many of those repetitive crime solving little mini games that you had to do to get the platinum trophy in Spider-Man 1. I just thought across the board, pretty much, it was a better experience. Those Mary Jane stealth sections were way better in Spider-Man 2. So I understand that Spider-Man 1, it's easy to give the first game in a series like the most props because hey, it's the first time that you're seeing it done and Spider-Man 1 was in 2018 that was on like such on another level for certainly Spider-Man games and I would argue superhero games. It also came at a time when people were a lot more into Marvel and superhero stuff in general. It was pre-in game, obviously, but yeah, but I think pound for pound, Spider-Man 2 is the best game in that series. Now, the reason that it's ranked so low is because it is still was critically appreciated, and obviously it sold millions of copies, and I think that it did very well. But just in the terms of just like the general discussion, you don't hear it brought up as much as I feel you should. So I've got Spider-Man 2 at number 25. Number 24, I have a game that I think is just sort of in the underappreciated, kind of undetected realm. Not so much. I think people that have played this probably recognize that it's really great, exemplary example of the genre that it's in. But number 24 is Blasphemous, which is a Metroidvania from the Game Kitchen. I can't actually remember when Blasphemous came out. When I played it for the first time in 2022. But I think it had been out for a little bit before that. So I'm gonna pull it up. I think it's a 2019 video game. So I would argue that it really ought to be considered one of the greatest video games from 2019. I haven't. I guess 2019 is not a year that I've spent a lot of time with. I think gosh, I don't even remember what the game. I guess the Game Award that year went to that FromSoft game, the kind of Ghost of Tsushima before Ghost of Tsushima. It's Sekiro, right? game that came out in 2019. I haven't actually played Sekiro. I'm sure it's awesome. I think there's a strong possibility that it is in fact better than Blasphemous. But other games that year, you had the Outer Worlds, you had that Link's Awakening remake, you had Crash Team Racing, Nitro Fueled, which is definitely a contender for this list. It might have been overlooked the fact that I'm not putting Nitro Fueled on the top 25. It's certainly a contender for underappreciated video game. A Control came out that year. The Resident Evil 2 remake came out that year, but I would put Blasphemous on the level of pretty much any of those, with the exception of maybe that Link's Awakening remake is pretty damn great. But I mean, you're going up against the Outer Worlds or some of that other stuff. I would certainly put Blasphemous in the conversation. It's a really great Metroidvania, definitely more in the style of the Castlevanias. I think, to be fair, I've never actually played a Castlevania game, but it is a RPG side scroller exploration game. Pretty heavy emphasis on combat, lots of good bosses. There's definitely some From Software influence in Blasphemous because it's pretty difficult, and when you die, you kind of have to run back to get your souls or something, or, the similar analog in Blasphemous. But I really enjoyed the RPG mechanics of it. The atmosphere is incredible, music is incredible. I thought the bosses were very well designed. Just the combat in general was very well designed. Even the platforming, I thought I was afraid that it was going to be a little bit stiff, and it is a little bit stiff. But they give you so many different tools as you go through the game to really lighten that up, and that I thought was very impressive. So yeah, it was a game that I 100% completed. I don't have the platinum trophy in it because it requires you to do two playthroughs and you have to do a speed run. I've actually done the speed run part, but I need to go back and do the last couple of things that I need to get the platinum trophy. I also didn't do there was one of the DLCs I didn't do, which seemed like it was like, really, really tough. And it led more into Blasphemous 2, which I have not played yet, although I do own it. So, but anyway, if you're a fan of the Metroidvania genres, you really got to play Blasphemous and probably Blasphemous 2, because that first one I can at least confirm is a really, really great game. One of the best in that genre that I've played. Number 23. This is a game that's definitely underrated. It's a game that is widely despised. It might actually be the most hated game on this list when you kind of get right down to it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's better than the majority of the games from the series, but in terms of a quality experience, I've got to give number 23 to Halo 5 Guardians. Now, Halo 5 is not as good. I would say it's probably below all of the Bungie developed Halo games. I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say that. So, people putting it below Halo 1, below Halo 2, below Halo 3, Reach, even ODST, I can understand that, and I respect that. But when people talk about it as being just a bad video game and worse than Halo 4, the worst Halo game, worse than Halo Infinite, I just have got to disagree. I think it's actually the best of the 343 Halo titles. Halo 4, I mean, I really liked what they did with the characterization of Master Chief and Cortana, but the gameplay of Halo 4 is where it really falls for me. I mean, you fight it's like those two, basically two major Promethean enemies, and they're just so repetitive. You're always running out of ammo. All of the guns that they created are very samey, I felt, and basically unnecessary. Looks great for the time. It's amazing that was running on an Xbox 360, but um, it, there was a lot of stuff that I still liked it fine, but a lot of stuff that definitely bothers me whenever I go back and play that. Halo 5, there's stuff that bothers me too. The fact that it did not have split screen was a huge mistake. And that's, I think, a big part of the reason that it has not had the staying power of those other games, like all the games that are in the Master Chief Collection, because those are kind of party games in a way. People come over and you can play the Halo campaigns with people, or you can play split screen multiplayer. Halo 5, you can't do that, and I think that hurt the game and its longevity and its reaction at the time heavily. And that's a legitimate complaint. But in terms of just if you're just going to play through the games by yourself, I think Halo 5's campaign is by far the best of the 343 campaigns. Um, I understand that people don't like the direction that they took with making you play as Locke and his team way more than you play as Master Chief, and I understand that. Those are not good characters. But the gameplay itself is really strong in Halo 5. I like the idea of what they were going for, of sort of enhancing Master Chief's aura by not letting you control him at all times and seeing other people react to his presence. And I think that was a good idea. It just maybe not as well executed as you would like. And then the other big complaint I hear is that people don't like the direction they took Cortana, but honestly, I think it's pretty interesting and well done. And I thought the stakes in Halo 5 were significantly higher and more interesting than what you saw in Halo 4 with those Prometheans that you don't even really understand who they are. In Halo 5, there's a lot of mystery too. The storytelling definitely got off the rails in terms of just making it an easy story that people could easily digest. But when you kind of get your head around it, I actually think that they have some pretty interesting themes, really great mission design, way better than what you would see in Infinite or Halo 4 on that front. And basically, a lot of the gameplay related problems that I had with Halo 4, I thought were rectified in Halo 5. So I still think that if you're a big Halo fan and you haven't given Halo 5 a chance because of the reaction that you've heard to it, or you haven't played it since 2015 and you were really upset about the fact that split screen wasn't in the game, you might want to go back and give it another shot because it's actually a pretty well made game. One of my favorite, I would say, first person shooters that is not made by Bungie doing the Halo games, because those are definitely my favorite, but just slightly below that level of quality, I would say. Number 22, this is a game I also hear as really kind of being bandied about as a bad game. And I can sort of see some of the arguments for that, but I definitely don't think it deserves the amount of criticism that it gets. It's overlooked, overly criticized. Number 22 is Croc Legend of the Go Boats. This is a game that I grew up with on the PlayStation 1. Whenever I got my PS1 on my 7th birthday, I believe, it was actually the first one that I opened along with my console was Croc Legend of the Gobos. And I think that Croc was a really they had a lot of things going for it at the time to make it very appealing to people my age. It was obviously a platformer, so that's a big win right there. But in terms of that, it was original, so it kind of had that going for it over a lot of the Disney stuff. Obviously, was licensed. The music and atmosphere of it was crazy good, like maybe the best of any of the PlayStation 1 platformers that I played. Maybe I could argue one of the Spyro games above it, but man, really, really impressive. Such a great soundtrack, great atmosphere, great visuals for the time. Very impressive visuals for the time. This is made by Argonaut, so not like a super well respected developer, but they did churn out some games back in that time frame for sure. And Croc was, I think, the best of them. What's interesting about Argonaut is they go all the way back to actually Star Fox. I worked on the Super FX chip with Nintendo, and they wanted to make a Yoshi based 3D platformer, either for the SNES or the Nintendo 64. It might have moved the during the seam there on the transition between those two consoles. But ultimately, that game was rejected, and what they ended up creating out of the ashes of that was Croc Legend of the Gobos. And I gotta say, having played Yoshi's Island later in my life, it really Croc Legend of the Gobos does remind me of a 3D Yoshi's Island. I mean, the way that you have to find keys to open doors is very similar. In Yoshi's Island, you're finding the coins, and in Croc you're finding these little like colored gems that you use to unlock the little bonus room at the end of each level, and then you have the gobos that you're collecting, which is kind of a more unique aspect of Croc. But that was a really interesting lens to kind of look at that through. And it's just the fact that it was one of the earliest, maybe even the earliest prototyped 3D platformer. So I think that it has a claim to of being a really historically significant game as well. Now, I understand that because it's an early 3D platformer, some of the control issues are not very good. The way that you control Croc is a little bit odd because left and right doesn't actually make him go left and right. It like turns him like almost like he's on a turret, and then you almost kind of drive him around the environments, and that takes a little bit of getting used to. I do think that playing with the analog stick helps a little bit with that, but even that can kind of lead to some weird situations where you almost need to go back and forth because sometimes you do just want to turn him with the way that they design the levels without actually moving him. So, it's a little finicky in the control area. There's no question about that. But that's really the only criticism that I have for the game, and something that wasn't as glaring at the time. Still don't think it's as glaring as a lot of the other control issues that you find with PlayStation 1 games at that time. And now there's the remastered version, which I haven't been able to play, and that's a whole rabbit hole about I actually ordered the collector's edition because I obviously am a big fan of Croc going all the way back to my early childhood, and I thought it was reasonably priced. I ordered that in October 2025 or 2024. Still haven't gotten it, and obviously I've refused to buy the digital version of the remastered version because I'm owed a copy of the game, which has been very frustrating. But I have heard that they fixed some of the control issues with the remaster version, so I'm looking forward to trying that out. If they'll Rocket Games and um, the restructured Argonaut will ever actually send it to me. But anyway, my venom on that aside, I still think that that game is a really solid 3D platformer. I would certainly put it above some of the games of the time. I wouldn't put it above the greats, obviously. I wouldn't put it above Super Mario 64. I haven't played Banjo-Kazooie, so I can't compare it to that, but I wouldn't be surprised if I would put it above Banjo-Kazooie. Certainly, I would put it above I would say, of the 3D. I wouldn't put it above Crash Team Racing. That's a totally different thing. But in terms of like the main three Crash Bandicoot games, I would put Croc above all those for sure. Definitely more expansive levels. Um, Frankly, I would even say deeper gameplay than what you'll find in at least the first couple Crash Bandicoots. I guess Crash Bandicoot 3 they added a lot of variety with the different vehicles and different control types of levels that you have there. But with Croc, I mean, I just think that they're more satisfying to play. It has more of a collectathon aspect to it, so that it's definitely got more replay value than Crash. I think it's better, not by a lot, but a better game than those. And I'd probably put it above Spyro 2 as well, which I know is generally considered a really great 3D platform, and it is a solid 3D platformer for sure. But I think Croc just has a little bit more going on than some of those games, so I definitely feel it's underappreciated. Number 21. This one is a little bit weird for me because this is a series that I'm a newcomer to. I'm a newfound fan of this series. I mean, I say that I've really been playing it for the last 3 or 4 years, but number 21 is Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. And I think generally with Fire Emblem fans, as far as I can tell, Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, and it also had another version, Conquest, are generally considered some of the weakest entries in the Fire Emblem series. And quite frankly, that may be true because the only other one that I've played is Fire Emblem 1 for the US in the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, I do like that game better than Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. But I still think Fire Emblem Fates Birthright is a really awesome game. It was my introduction to the series. I absolutely loved it. And I think that maybe among Fire Emblems it wouldn't rank super high, but I think in terms of games in general, it is still one of the strongest games that I have played. It's not top 25 worthy, but maybe you start talking top 50, top 75. It's certainly in the top 100, top 75. Top 50, it's probably around on the cusp of that for me, games that I've played. And I just there's a lot of stuff that I really like about it. I recognize that on a storytelling level, maybe it isn't as strong as like certainly as a Fire Emblem 1 and maybe some of the other Fire Emblems that I haven't played. But in terms of just mechanics, it's really quite satisfying. You get so many different characters. I love the permadeath aspect of it, which I know is a mainstay of the series. But there's a little bit the game does well with the presentation. You have like this base that you go back to that you can customize between all the battles. There's interactions, these conversations that you have between the characters in between battles, which is certainly not a thing in the first Fire Emblem that I really enjoy. The fact that you can kind of try to build the relationships between characters and have them get married and have children, and then you bring those into the fold, and that creates like whole different stories that like side quests that you get to do, in fact. And it's a really, really impressively deep game on the 3DS, and I just had a really good time with it. Very graphically impressive for the 3DS as well. So, other than it maybe not being the strongest storytelling game I've ever seen, I really liked everything else about the game. Really, it got enraptured in it, and I think it's one of my favorite games that I've played in recent times. So, for that reason, Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, I'm putting very high on the list. Maybe not your number one Fire Emblem game, but if you're a fan of turn-based strategy RPGs, you definitely shouldn't overlook it. Number 20, this is a game that is a weird one to rank because it's one of those games sort of similar to Spider-Man 2 in a way, I guess, that it's highly regarded but also not highly regarded depending on who you ask. And it's kind of like an intersection between these two. Um, it's a very large fan base, so there's this is like a lot of tumult within it. Number 20 on my list is Fallout 4, which I think is certainly an all-timer for me. This is the game that maybe it might be the game that I've played the most, other than maybe Skyrim, in my life. I've put over 1,000 hours into it. I think Skyrim's the only one that I could have possibly even done that with. Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, I definitely played a lot as well. But Fallout 4, I definitely understand. I don't think it's as good as Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, which are the games that came before it. And so, in that sense, I understand that people were disappointed with it. But I think a lot of the criticism that this game got is a little bit unfounded. Like people talked about how it's just got this terrible story. The side quests were not good. The world was uninteresting. They went way too hard on like the looter shooter aspect of it. The base building sucked. And I don't really agree with any of those criticisms. Yes, I don't think the storytelling was on the level of like a Fallout 3. But I don't think it was far off actually. And seeing Reagan experience it was really fun because she has had no idea about the twist with the kid, and so she was like setting up his room and back at the house and getting it ready for when we found him, and so that was like really fun to see. I really like the I think with the base building they definitely cut down on the number of like memorable settlements. Like Fallout 3 did that extremely well, where there's all these memorable settlements that you would go to that had their own identity. And Fallout 4 kind of loses that on that outside of Good Neighbor and Diamond City, because I think they kind of expected you to build up some of these farms and stuff. And that could be a little bit disappointing. I can understand, but I really like having that base building there. It's not a critical part of the game, but I do think that it's simple enough yet all and approachable enough yet also engaging enough to invite people to tinker with it, which is kind of walks a really fine tightrope. But I think that they did a pretty good job with that. In terms of the shooting aspect of the game, I mean, it was a gigantic improvement over New Vegas and Fallout 3. It's not even close. Like, there's no comparison between the two. I think that the shooting mechanics in Fallout 4 are perfectly fine, good even. The way that you can aim down the sights and everything with that, still mix in VATS when you want to. That was really great. I really liked what they did with the perk system. They made it a little bit more in the Skyrim vein, but they used the big poster to determine it, and like it made your stats matter a lot more because that determined which perks that you could unlock. And they give you a lot less of the skills at the beginning too, so that they really incentivize you to build up your character that way. That was really well done. I really like the factions too. People criticize the factions, say they're poorly written. There's some criticisms to be made about them for sure, but I really like how you can sort of play them against each other and really try to. They all actually try to make themselves appealing to you, and they all have arguments for why you would join them. And I thought that was something that was lacking in Fallout New Vegas. I know New Vegas is considered like the pinnacle of the series and it's so beloved. And I definitely think, if I was doing an overrated video game list, Fallout New Vegas would be a top contender for sure. New Vegas with the factions, to me, it's just they're all so flawed that it's hard for me to even justify doing anything other than just kind of taking over Vegas for yourself, go working with Yes Man. Whereas in Fallout 4, they're also all flawed, but you don't have I mean, I guess you have the Minutemen, but they're boring, so you don't want to, do that. And so you kind of have to pick between the main three, and they're all flawed. They all have ramifications for those choices. And they all make an effort to try to justify why you should join them. And I think that there's many different characters that have different justifications for joining different ones, depending on kind of the character type that you're going for. And so I thought that would they more than just way higher than Fallout New Vegas justified the existence of the different factions, and like actually making it a legitimately difficult choice to determine who to go with. And I liked how they kind of interacted with each other. There's battles where they face off, and you generally eventually you do have to pick a side. But that first major battle at Bunker Hill, you can actually walk in there, and everybody thinks that you're on their side. I think that is awesome. That's really great game design that I think does not get enough appreciation. Side quests, yes, not on the level of Fallout 3 and New Vegas. I agree on the whole. But I still think that they were really fun to do. And I think that just going around in the world and the combat, since the combat was so much better, that was a lot better. The armor system is a thousand times better with the layered armor, and you can really craft individual pieces of armor. Just the crafting system in general was and the junk system, a gigantic improvement. Yes, it made it feel like more of a looter shooter, but it was loot that you really cared about, loot that you were using to improve your weapons that you were investing your time and effort into, and it made everything in the world like actually mean something instead of just clutter, which I think was just a great idea all around. It's just a really well made game on all those different aspects. DLC disappointing compared to Fallout 3 for sure, but especially considering how little of it there was compared to Fallout 3. But still, some of the best parts of the game are in the DLC. I know people really love the Far Harbor DLC, and I agree that it's solid. It's probably the best of the bunch, but I still wouldn't put it anywhere near above some of the best Fallout DLCs, but like the Pit. But I still think it was solid and fun to go through that. Kind of same with Nuka World. Was definitely underwhelming compared to Far Harbor, but fun to play through at any rate. And that's the thing about Fallout 4, I think that it just doesn't get enough credit for, is that it is just really fun to play. And it's got all these different aspects of it that come together, I think, really well. And maybe it's not the greatest game of ever made. It's obviously woefully inadequate compared to something like The Witcher 3 that came out the same year, right? But there's so many things that it does super well, and I do consider it to be a really fantastic game that I think does not deserve the level of hate. Like people say it's like the beginning of the downfall of Bethesda, and I just don't think that that's true. I think that it is significantly better than anything they've released since then, and I really enjoyed it at the time. And when I go back to it, I still have a really good time. I don't go back to it as anywhere near as much these days as I used to, because I definitely I put my time in with the game. But I still think that it's an awesome game that anyone that's a fan of open world RPG should experience. Okay, number 19. This is an interesting one. I guess the reason I have this game here is because I think that it is a really, really great game. Maybe it's my favorite in this series, and it's never brought up as one of the greatest in the series. Number 19 is The Sims Bustin' Out for the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. This was a mainstay in my PlayStation 2 library, and I think it was the mainstay in a decent chunk of PlayStation 2 libraries. The Sims coming to consoles was obviously a very smart move, because it doesn't control as well on consoles as it does on PC, but it's definitely still appealed to the console crowd, and I think a big part of it was games like The Sims Busting Out. It was an actual console exclusive Sims game. They made a port of the original Sims to consoles, and that was cool and all. But The Sims Busting Out, to have an original game that was really built for consoles, it allowed you to go to different places. You weren't just building up the one house over the course of the game. You actually like you lived in different places and did different careers. And so it's very replayable. It had like all this checklisty stuff that you could unlock that I found very satisfying. Had a lot of different characters. And it's my favorite Sims game, without a doubt. It even had the multiplayer. So that was really cool. You couldn't play through like the main story campaign with multiplayer, which was a little bit disappointing. But even just playing the multiplayer that was there, spent hours doing that as a kid. So I think it's the most total package for Sims games on consoles. People could argue the Sims 3 on like PS3 and 360, and I can understand that. But the Sims 3, I guess it's different strokes. Like Sims 3, it's a little bit samey. I think like it doesn't have a variety of the different places that you live, the things to unlock, the different career paths that the Sims Busting Out has. It's deeper in a way because your Sims have a lot more like desires and things like that. The Sims Busting Out is old school, so it's really just have your goals that the game sets out for you, and then of course you're managing your Sims' happiness and friendships and things of that nature. But man, I really, really spent so much time playing The Sims Busting Out. I think it's an awesome game. Is it something that newcomers to The Sims can go back to? It definitely would be more of a challenge probably than kind of the newfangled stuff that you see in The Sims 4 and The Sims 3. But at the same time, it doesn't have any of that crap in the game like the Sims 4. It's just like such a microtransaction laden mess. Whereas this is busting out. It's clean and pure. It's a game you pop in your PS2 and you're ready to go, and it's ready to spend hours having some good time. So it's my favorite game in the Sims series. And I think if you grew up around the time that I did, you probably have some fond memories of it too. Number 18. This is we're gonna start getting into some like legitimately really great games here on in the list. This is one of them. But I think, and this is a game that I think is considered great, but I don't think it's considered to be the greatest FPS ever made, and that's I think the level that I hold it in, and that's why I still consider it to be underrated. Number 18 is Halo Reach. I think it is the of all the FPSs I've played, and you know, granted, I have played probably a fraction of the number that are out there, especially from the PS3 360 era, where God knows that was like half the games that were being made at least, but of all the ones I've played, all the Halo games, the Call of Duties that I've dabbled with, the Kill Zones, uh, whatever, Medal of Honor, Halo Reach beats all of them easily. It's not even close. I think the storytelling in Halo Reach is incredible. That it was such a bold move to not have Master Chief in the game and focus on these other characters that you kind of knew were all screwed from the beginning. Very similar to Rogue One, but they do such a good job of actually making you invested in these characters to a degree that you wouldn't have thought possible, considering it comes just a year after ODST, and all those characters are a complete disaster. I mean, the story of ODST is god awful. But Halo Reach's storytelling is great. The stakes continuing to get raised throughout the game is just super well done. The mission design is just the best I've ever seen, best in class for FPS shooters. The levels are huge, expansive, fun, varied. All of the levels stand out on their own. Even whenever you have to go back to one environment later in the game, it feels completely different. It's just obviously the vehicles that Halo is so well known for are the best in Halo Reach. They even threw in a space flight mission that was really awesome and actually was surprisingly fun. And mixed that with the typical Halo grounded gameplay, going into these different ships and Star Wars style. It's like crazy impressive. It just fires on absolutely every cylinder. I think by far the best Halo game, by far the best FPS that I've ever played, and I think it definitely does not get enough respect. The only one that I can think of that maybe would give it a run for its money because I haven't played it is Titanfall 2. People seem to hold in that level of regard, and that's definitely a game that I need to check out. But I got to tell you right now, I highly doubt that I would put it above Halo Reach just for all the reasons that I said, and obviously I'm now attached to it after, um, playing it all these years. But I love that game so much. It's one of my favorite storytelling tropes, I will say, of just this group of soldiers going up against all odds. It's kind of a doom. It's a sort of a suicide mission, but they fight to the last. And you see that in Rogue One, which is one of my favorite films of all time, easily my favorite Star Wars movie, especially post Andor. And Halo Reach had the same quality. And I think that there's a very good chance that Rogue One is actually influenced by Halo Reach because Gary Whitta worked on Halo 5 and Halo Reach, so obviously he was familiar with the Halo storytelling. Anyway, I really favorite FPS of all time, Halo Reach. It's obviously well appreciated, but I don't think it's well appreciated enough. Number 18 on this list. Number 17 is kind of another game that's in a similar situation, except I even have it in a higher regard. Number 17 is Kingdom Hearts 1. So, generally whenever you talk to Kingdom Hearts fans, geez, I don't know if it's 80%, 90% will tell you that Kingdom Hearts 2 is the best in the series. And I understand that they definitely refined some of the combat stuff. They made it much more approachable. That really the whole game they made more approachable. You're never confused really on where to go. It's always kind of laid out for you. You just go and mash buttons and have fun. Um, and maybe some of the movie choices were a little bit more appropriate in Kingdom Hearts 2 as well, with some of the Disney properties that they utilized. But Kingdom Hearts 1, I mean, geez, if you were there at the beginning like I was, it was just unbelievable. You got all just the whole concept of Kingdom Hearts, the fact that that even exists is so impressive. And just seems like so out of nowhere and harebrained, really. And to me, like it's one of those that even gets crazier the older I get, just thinking about how nuts that it is that they created this original story wrapped around these Disney and Final Fantasy elements. It's just so awesome, so like perfectly geared toward me, someone that grew up watching Disney movies as a very, very young child. And then now Final Fantasy is easily my favorite series of all time. And then you have Kingdom Hearts there. It's just such an unbelievable dream of a project, fever dream of a project, really. But I really like Kingdom Hearts 1 for a lot of reasons. It's by far my favorite in the series. It's one of my favorite games of all time, easily in my top five. I think what I really appreciate about Kingdom Hearts is it's as crazy as this is going to sound, it's actually way more grounded in its storytelling than any of the Kingdom Hearts games that came after it. Kingdom Hearts has this reputation of this series has these games that are convoluted and the story is convoluted and it definitely is. But Kingdom Hearts 1, it had a little bit of that, but really it was kind of a standalone story. It was before things got super crazy, and they introduced all these concepts that they introduced in later games. And it's the beginning of it's not it's no longer at the beginning of the timeline, but it's at the beginning of your understanding of the timeline. And so it all just kind of works together. I also think they did a really good job of mixing this original story with the Disney worlds and Final Fantasy storytelling. Much better in Kingdom Hearts 1. It actually felt more cohesive than in Kingdom Hearts 2 and later games where it was just like you kind of had these long stretches where you were just doing Disney stuff. And you spend more time in each of the worlds in Kingdom Hearts 1. And so they establish themselves more as having a more significant sense of place and weight behind them, which I think you kind of miss out on in Kingdom Hearts 2 and some of the others where you're just dipping in and out a lot faster. Um, I really like the beginning of it. It's slow. I really love slow beginnings to video games and just different forms of media, which I know a lot of people don't like that. They like to get in and have their action right away, but Kingdom Hearts is definitely not like that, and that definitely established the tone and atmosphere of it at the time. I actually, when I first played as a kid, I couldn't even get off that island. I couldn't figure out what to do, and you're finding it's like basically a scavenger hunt, and I couldn't find all that stuff. And I actually finally a friend came over and kind of helped me do it, and that was really exciting. And then that just like opened up all these possibilities and getting deeper into the game. And I was so excited about the finally finding Donald and Goofy and actually getting into the Disney stuff because the Disney stuff at that time was what I was really excited about. I was Disney fan number one, didn't even know what Final Fantasy was, and then of course I was interested in whatever the story they were telling here. And later on, Final Fantasy obviously became my favorite series. But I think what I love about Kingdom Hearts so much is just that original story that they told, wrapped up around in all of that other those other colors, and I think that that's really cool. And then another thing about Kingdom Hearts 1 is, I know almost everyone would tell you that they like the combat in Kingdom Hearts 2 more, but I actually don't. I like the combat in Kingdom Hearts 1 significantly more. I think you have to think about it more. It's more thoughtful. You can't just go in there and mash buttons to the same degree that you can in Kingdom Hearts 2. And I think that the magic system and especially the summon system is so much better in Kingdom Hearts 1. Like every time you get a new summon in Kingdom Hearts 1, it is a significant development. These are things that you can use and use effectively. Whereas in Kingdom Hearts 2, they're all trash and you just use your drives instead because they're way more effective than your summons. And so it's just kind of like an afterthought. But in Kingdom Hearts 1, it is not an afterthought. You get the Tinkerbell with the health regen, you get the Bambi with the basically infinite magic for a specific period. Um, Game changers on the battlefield, let me tell you. And some of the boss designs that they came up with, particularly the bosses that were kind of like the super bosses they added at the in the sort of like the post game with the particularly that phantom that goes around the Peter Pan clock tower. It's like such an iconic fight to me. Of course, the original version of Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts that's just like ludicrously powerful. Some of the Titans that they came up with in like the Hercules stuff. So many good fights in that game, and as a total package, I've got to give it to Kingdom Hearts 1 significantly above all the others. I think it has an unbelievable ending, one of the greatest endings of all time to any video game, and it just does such a good job of actually effectively mixing all of the elements that it has without it getting out of hand. Like, maybe it does in some of the later Kingdom Hearts games. So, for all those reasons, Kingdom Hearts 1 is one of my all time favorites. And I think that I have it underappreciated here because you just never see it mentioned as the best game in the series or even one of the greatest games of all time because Kingdom Hearts 2 just totally takes all of the limelight. And I think that's a shame. So, I'm highlighting it here at number 17. Number 16, we're going to have a little bit of a similar conversation to what we just had with Fallout 4. Number 16 is Fallout 3. One of, I think, the most underappreciated video games of all time. Now, Fallout 3 At the time, I will say it was probably not underappreciated when it first released because it was a huge hit. And as for a lot of people, the introduction to Fallout was certainly my introduction to Fallout, and well beloved by all of those people. But for already at the beginning, I think for like longtime fans of the series, there was already kind of this belly aching about it. And then New Vegas came out, and there was like this split in the fan base where there was like these New Vegas fanboys, and they were just like, Fallout 3 is trash. It's a terrible game. You see so many long-winded essays on YouTube talking to with that opinion. Um, and I just don't understand that thought at all. I think Fallout 3 is not only the best Fallout game, I think Fallout 3 is the best Bethesda game. I think it's one of the greatest open world games of all time. At the time it was released, it had to have been the greatest. Now, there's been some that have come out since then, like your Red Dead 2s, your Witcher 3s, that it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's not on the level of those as a storytelling video game. But man, the tone and atmosphere of that game is just unbelievable. The openness of the game is very impressive. I think the storytelling is better than the other Fallouts. I think a lot of that goes to the performance and just like the gravity of Liam Neeson's performance as your father. And it's a little bit more of a relatable story, I guess, because we all have fathers. Maybe they weren't present fathers, but um, that's something that we can all sort of relate to on a base level. Whereas with Fallout 4, it's like the roles are reversed and you're looking for your son. It's like, well, not everybody has a kid. Maybe not everybody likes kids or cares about going to find this kid that we don't really even know anything about. It was just an infant, right? You don't have any attachment to it. Whereas they really established at the beginning of the game that your father's like this honorable guy. He's kind of surrounded in a tough situation in the vault, and yeah, he does his best with you as a single father. And so yeah, you do want to go find him. And there's like when he leaves, there is this mystery of like what happened, and you want to go out there and see what's going on. And that intro, while we're talking about it, I think it's one of the most effective intros in all of video games because yes, it's a slow intro again, and I am a big believer in those. People just want to get out into the vault and they out of the vault and into the open world. And I understand that, but especially the first time, the way that they set everything up in the vault and really establish your character's sense of place and who they are in the world, and in context with their father and the other people that are in the vault, and then seeing that all kind of go belly up by the end of that hour is just, I think, really really well done. And it makes whenever you leave the vault, which feels very cramped and dark, into the open world for the first time, especially if it's your first open world game like it was for me, it's just like an unbelievable moment and of freedom, right? And it really gets you in the headspace of your character that has grown up in the vault their whole life. In terms of storytelling, really like it. I really like the ending too. At least when you do it right. I mean, it's an ending that's very easily screwed up. If you actually do it in the way that they expected, which is the first time I played the game that is the way that it just happened to work out for me, it hits. But yes, it's got a lot of holes in it, and I understand some of the criticisms with that. With the side quests, I can sort of understand if you want to say that Fallout New Vegas' side quests are better than Fallout 3's. That's a fair argument. I can maybe accept that as well. But in terms of the atmosphere, I think Fallout 3 takes it no contest. In terms of the just like the world building, it takes it no contest. Way more unique, way more interesting world than that's kind of the barren wasteland that you get in New Vegas. The DLC in Fallout 3, I think was just unbelievable. The amount that they gave you and the quality of all of those, particularly the pit, I just think is one of the greatest DLCs of all time. But I just remember playing that game for the first time, and maybe I've told this story on the podcast before, but when I played that game, I didn't even understand what a DLC was. We didn't have Wi-Fi in the house, and so I just happened to get the Game of the Year version with them all on the disc on the PS3. And so, I was going around the open world, something abducted by aliens. I'm going up in space. I'm like, look, this is crazy. I'm going to the pit. It's a completely different map. I'm arrested, or I'm become a slave. And I'm like, how am I going to, this is a disaster. How am I going to get out of this situation? Like all that stuff just really hit me just at the perfect time and it just blew me away. But in terms of just what this game does better than other Bethesda games, other Fallout games, I think it comes down to the tone and the atmosphere, the storytelling. Just the quality of the setting, I think, is on another level. And all those things together, and really just like um, the dialogue, really. Like, I just think it's better written than any of them. Like New Vegas, like they have like all this lore behind it, right? But it's not told in an interesting way or an entertaining way. It's just you get people that'll just like drone on and on, just telling you about it for dozens of minutes at a time, and it gets really dull. Whereas with Fallout, they did it in such a more elegant way, and the writing is just so humorous, but set and yet still serious. It doesn't get into the Outer Worlds territory where it's like it's so ridiculous to the point where you can't even really take it seriously. With Fallout 3, you can always take it seriously, but they still manage to mix in that humor, that dark humor that the series is so well known for. I just love Fallout 3, man. I think it's the best game in the series. I think it's one of the greatest open world games of all time, and I just think that the number of people that feel that way continues to diminish over the course of time. And so for that reason, I have it here at number 16 as an underappreciated game. Number 15, this is probably the most recent release on this list. Maybe this, I guess this came out the same year as Spider-Man 2. Number 15 is Final Fantasy 16. So, I I'm of kind of two minds of this. I think that there are some people that have criticisms of Final Fantasy 16 that are fair, but I think that there are a lot of criticisms of Final Fantasy 16 that are unfair. And I think that as a result, I think it is underappreciated. So some of the main criticisms you hear that it doesn't really feel like a true Final Fantasy game. It's more of an action game. Well, that's true in a sense. It is way more action heavy than other Final Fantasies. But at the same time, no Final Fantasy has been experimenting with its combat system literally going back to Final Fantasy 12. Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy, obviously the MMOs, Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. They've all had completely different combat systems, and Final Fantasy 16's I think is excellent. I think it's probably my favorite of the Final Fantasy combat system outside of like the traditional turn-based Final Fantasies. I really one thing that I really thought that it was kind of a fair criticism was the fact that you only control Clive, right? So you don't get this sense of having like this party and them all having kind of their different voices in the combat, and that's fair. However, the degree to which you can customize Clive and the way that the game reward doesn't hinder you from just switching things out and experimenting with different moves you can respec at any time for free. It just incentivizes experimentation in the combat. And I guess if you don't do that, then you miss out on that. But I did. And I just had so much fun coming up with all these different combos that you could do in Final Fantasy 16, mixing these different, whatever they call them, icons or whatever, their different abilities together. So I really love that. For Clive himself, I mean, I guess nobody really disputes that Clive is clearly one of the all-time great Final Fantasy protagonists. They clearly put a lot of work into him. It made Ben Starr a superstar in the Final Fantasy community, and just as a voice actor in our modern age for sure. But one thing I really loved about Clive's arc is that you kind of a lot of the sort of stoic Final Fantasy protagonists, and there's no shortage of them. You have your Clouds, you have your Squalls. Um, they kind of, and even Noctis, you kind of like it takes till the end of the game when they finally like kind of come to terms with who they are and really kind of hit their stride, right? But with Clive, he comes from a much darker place than those characters in a lot of ways, especially with some of the things that he commits, particularly whenever he first transforms into his icon. And so he has a lot more guilt than them, justifiable guilt. But then he really comes into his own, not even halfway through the game. There's like a big major event that happens. There's a time jump, and then Clive is like peak Clive for the majority of the game. And I think that's a really interesting way to tell that story. Totally different style of character arc for a Final Fantasy protagonist than what you would typically see. And that was, I think, really appreciated, and I think made for a really excellent protagonist, one of the best in the series. People talk about how the side quests in Final Fantasy 16 are not good. That is true to a degree. However, they are better than the side quests, I would argue, in the other Final Fantasy games of the time. Better than the Final Fantasy 15 side quest for sure. Better than I would argue the Final Fantasy 7 remake side quests and Rebirth. Really, I mean, there's some god awful side quests in those games. Let me tell you. Final Fantasy 16, I think those side quests are actually not bad. I think the people didn't like the structure of it, where you do a big story sequence and then there's like it unlocks a bunch of side quests, and you kind of keep having to go back to these same people, and people thought it got old. But really, I mean, the combat is so good that I didn't really think any of the side quests were outright bad. I think they just people were kind of ready for the game to be over and it wasn't ending if you were doing all the side quests. And that's, really that's not the game's fault. I mean, the game is a really large RPG that does not force you to engage with those side quests. But I think if you do engage with them, it does a good job of building out these side characters and these side parts of the world. And so I think that in that sense, I think they are a success. I think people have argued that the supporting cast is not very strong. I mean, that's fair to say. I mean, it's definitely not as strong as a typical Final Fantasy in that aspect, but I still think it's very good. I don't think that it's worth really making a big stink over, just because of kind of what they were going for. It was like they were really putting a lot of the effort behind this main character, and I thought that that worked for this story. So I don't. People say that like there's not enough loot. I get like people like there's not enough RPG mechanics with like your gear and things like that. But I was really happy to not have to deal with that. Like, give me which sword does the most damage, and I'm good to go. I don't need to sit here and tinker with all these different pieces of gear with Final Fantasy 16, and so I didn't miss that aspect of it either. So the only reason that I don't have Final Fantasy 16 higher is because it was appreciated to a degree. I don't think it was even nominated for Game of the Year of 2023, which is crazy to me. I mean, I think it was easily one of the best games of that year. Although I wouldn't put it at number one, and we'll talk about that later. But I do think that as a story, it's maybe not on the level of many of the other Final Fantasy, so I wouldn't put it, on like the top of the list or near the top of the list for the best Final Fantasies that I've played. But in terms of the best games that have come out this decade, I think it is very high. I think that it is underappreciated in that context. Kind of when you get outside of the series that it's in, just as a video game. I think it is exceptional. I think the boss battles are awesome. I think that the combat is incredible. I think the main character is one of the best. Obviously, the music is fantastic. Nobody disputes that. I really just think it's a really, really well made and well produced game. And for that reason, I think that it does not get the love it respects or it deserves as one of the great all time great video games of this decade. So for that reason, I've got it here at number 15. Number 14, we're turning back the clock a little bit here. And this is a game that I played as a kid. It's a game that definitely was overshadowed by its sequel and more modern releases in this series. But I think that there's a lot of things that this game does better than any other game in the series. Number 14 on this list is the original Star Wars Battlefront from 2004 on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. What I really think that Star Wars Battlefront 1 did better than any of the other games in the series is its map design. The map design in Star Wars Battlefront 1 is just immaculate. I mean, I think that it is some of the greatest level design I've ever seen in multiplayer shooters. They did such a good job of, and there's actually a series going on YouTube right now of this guy. Let me see if I can find his name for you to recommend his channel if you haven't heard of him already. But he's kind of going through and talking about analyzing all of the Star Wars Battlefront 1 maps and just talking about how well designed they are. Let's say dunes. That's one of the best maps in the game. It's Chewy Dad 16, Ciudad 16. He's going through and sort of analyzing all the different Star Wars Battlefront maps. And he does a really great job of illustrating what makes each of them special and unique when they are. And they also do a good job of still sort of making you feel like you're in Star Wars. Like they do a good job of sort of referencing the films and the settings that are in the films, but at the same time, like making really, really strong and well-made multiplayer maps out of them. So that's the main thing in terms of just map design. I don't think I've ever seen a game do it better than Star Wars Battlefront. And then in terms of just like the core gameplay, it's definitely taking some cues from the Battlefield series from EA. So it's definitely it's command posts or capturing points on the map and trying to hold them, right? But I think that is my favorite approach to multiplayer shooters just in general. I think that's more fun than like just a a Slayer or a death match or a team death match. I think that there's just so much more strategy that goes into it with the capturing of the command post, and I think that that's true in multiplayer. But I think it's true in just single player as well. It's just the majority of the time that I've spent playing Star Wars Battlefront in my life what is single player, just going through. And doing the Galactic Conquest, which is always fun and very replayable, where it's like you are trying to capture all of the different planets in the game. There's the sort of historical version where you are kind of I guess you it's the closest thing that you would get to single player campaign where you go through kind of in rough order the battles of the series. Granted, this game came out before Star Wars Episode 3, so it actually ends at the Battle of Kashyyyk, which I guess they had discussed was going to be in the movie, but they didn't go beyond that. Um, so there's no like Coruscant or anything like that map in it. But yeah, I just think that the map design is really great. I think the strategy is higher than it gets credit for. I think as a Star Wars game, it excels, yeah, in a huge way. It's just huge fan fiction potential in there that they capitalized on, and I think that it does a lot of those things better than the games that came after it. Star Wars Battlefront 2, which definitely was uh I think probably well, I actually don't know if it was more successful than Star Wars Battlefront 1 or not, but definitely it definitely captured a lot of the mind share as soon as it came out compared to Star Wars Battlefront 1. And there are things that Battlefront 2 does better. The gameplay is for sure better, like the shooting gameplay of it. And they give you sprint and things like that, which is a huge improvement. They give you space battles, they give you an actual single player campaign. All those are improvements. But I do think that the map design suffered in Star Wars Battlefront 2. And part of that is that they made it a much more balanced game. And Star Wars Battlefront 1 is not a balanced game in any way. The droids are way overpowered compared to the clones. And there are maps where they give one side a huge advantage. Like if you go to Kashyyyk, well, the clones have the Wookiees fighting for them, and the droids just have no answer for that. They're just like, well, great, we got to fight some Wookiees while we're here on top of the clones, and by killing Wookiees, it doesn't advance our position at all. And so that's just like a huge disadvantage for the droids in that sense. Then on the flip side, you have Geonosis, where they start with like every command post. It's like, well, Jesus, what are you supposed to do? You're the clones, and the answer is lose. And so just like things like that, where they really make it unbalanced. But I think that that adds to some of the fun of Star Wars Battlefront. And I think that there's a case we made that not everything needs to be perfectly balanced when it comes to multiplayer shooters. And I think that the creators Pandemic really understood that. And shout out to Pandemic as well, the creators of Star Wars Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront 2, the Mercenary series, Destroy All Humans. They were just firing on all cylinders. I felt in that PS2 era, they were, I think, at one time my favorite developer in that kind of mid to late PS2 era. And of course, they ended up being acquired and losing all their identity very quickly, and that was really sad to see. But really loved their work. Star Wars Battlefront, I think, was the pinnacle of their work at that time, probably ever. And maybe it's something that it'd be tougher to go back to than say the modern Star Wars Battlefront 2 that everybody's playing and having a good time with. And I got the platinum trophy in that. Either earlier this year or late last year. I don't know, within the last year. And I had a lot of great fun with that game as well. Actually, I was surprised how much I ended up enjoying it. And there's even a case we made that maybe you could argue that's a better game. It's certainly a more total package than the first Star Wars Battlefront. But in terms of multiplayer design, I think Star Wars Battlefront does it better than really any other game that I've played. And so for that reason, I have it at number 14 on this list. So I have number 13 here. We've already been going for an hour and a half, just about, and we still have half the list to get to. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a call on audible here and split this up into two episodes. So I'm going to stop here after number 13, and then we'll have our top 12 most underappreciated video games in the part two of this little mini series that we have created for ourselves. But number 13, this is going to be an interesting one. Number 13, underappreciated game, I have Pokemon Coliseum. And Pokemon Coliseum is an interesting one because it was definitely an anomaly when it came out. And in some ways, it was what we were all waiting for as Pokemon fans growing up with the Game Boy. I mean, it was a Pokemon RPG on the big screen, on the GameCube, extremely high quality graphics for the time, extremely unbelievably high quality animation for the time that Game Freak has not even come close to matching even now, which is really embarrassing considering this game came out in like 2003 in Japan, I think in 2004 for us here in the US. Um, but I actually would put Pokemon Coliseum above some of the mainline games in the series. I would certainly put it above X and Y. I'd put it above Sword and Shield. It gets a little bit tougher to say whether I will put it above it. Well, on Black and White too, I'd put it above Black and White too, without doubt. It gets a little bit tougher to say that I would put it above any of the other ones after that, just because it is a more limited game in a lot of ways compared to the main games in the series. You don't have the exploration aspect. There's no wild Pokemon in Pokemon Coliseum. You have only a pool of about 48 Pokemon that you can actually pull from in Pokemon Coliseum, or maybe it's more like 50, 50, low 50s that you can actually pull from in Pokemon Coliseum. Um, which is kind of a shame. Like in that sense, you may argue that it limits replay value. Although I played Pokemon Coliseum many times over the course of my life, so it didn't limit replay value for me. I actually kind of like how it sort of incentivizes you to use Pokemon that maybe you wouldn't use in the main game because you just have a lower number of options. But I really like that. I really love the presentation, like I mentioned. Music is really strong. But I think what I really like about Pokemon Coliseum is the atmosphere and just kind of this. Actually, some of the storytelling in Pokemon Coliseum compared to most of the other games of the series, I think is significantly stronger. It has this dark undertone that was very popular with people that were growing up in the 2000s. Everybody was kind of angsty back then. We were all listening to Linkin Park and all that, and fans of Shadow the Hedgehog and the Sonic series. And Pokemon Coliseum definitely tapped into that a little bit. You're kind of this darker guy. He's wearing this trench coat, and he used to be a part of the villain team, and then he broke away from them, and is kind of on a redemption arc. But he's still his goal is still stealing Pokemon, but he's stealing them from the bad guys. And then all the Pokemon are dark; their hearts have been closed, and you got to purify them. So they kind of even the Pokemon aspect of it is a little bit edgy, which I really like. But I really think that the atmosphere of the um, area, the what do you call it? The region, I guess, that you're in Pokemon Coliseum, I think is really interesting. Definitely, totally unique. Most of the time, you're in a desert, and that's very different than what you typically would see in a Pokemon game, which is usually lush and has lots of grass and areas that Pokemon where you would find Pokemon out in the wild, and you just don't do that in Pokemon Coliseum, which I think is kind of to its benefit to a degree. Like it just makes it feel unique and it definitely has its own really unique identity. Another thing I really like about Pokemon Coliseum compared to other games in the series is it's way harder than most of the games in the series. It actually requires some strategy. I like that all of the battles are double battles, so that increases the strategy already just kind of on its face. But they boss battles that they put in that game are no joke. They actually employ legitimate strategies like having an earthquake team, but where the other Pokemon uses protect and they alternate between them, or you have a team that's like based around using double team, spam and double team, and then kind of beating you that way where you can't hit them. There's a team that the final boss of the game actually uses like kind of skill swap on like a Slay King, which is like one of the most powerful Pokemon in the game, but that most every other turn. But they can take that away, and then it's just like a really heavy hitter. Stuff like that strategies that you would never see in like the just like a typical Pokemon game that I think is really cool. And I just don't think it gets enough credit for all of those things. I think it's easily overlooked because it's stuck on the GameCube. Now, Nintendo has announced that they are actually going to put it on the Switch Online, which I think is really exciting. That is not something I would have expected. I honestly never thought that we would see this game come back, and part of that is because I thought that Game Freak would be embarrassed to see it come back because that game embarrasses them in a lot of ways, particularly when it comes to the level of the visuals and animation. But apparently they are going to do that, and they're going to put it on the Switch, and I think that that's really cool. Hopefully, more people will experience it that way. I still think that you're missing out a little bit of the magic of the game, which is that you could trade with the Game Boy Advance games of Gen 3, and that was like kind of a magical thing of like raising these Pokemon on the small screen and seeing trading them up to the TV and actually seeing them in all of their fully animated glory is something that you can't really replicate today. And obviously now if you play the game on the Switch, all those Pokemon are going to be stuck on the game. You can't move them to the Pokemon Home or anything like that. That's my expectation anyway. Now they could prove me wrong, and I'd be thrilled if they did. But that's my expectation right now. So they might lose something there, but still the core experience will still be there and it will be intact, and hopefully people will check it out and enjoy it. I think another thing that makes Pokemon Coliseum underrated is it had a sequel, Pokemon XD, that came out a couple years after that, and I actually see people try to say that Pokemon XD is better than Pokemon Coliseum. That is crazy to me. It totally like lost all of the atmosphere and kind of dark edge to it, and like any sort of like good storytelling that was in Pokemon Coliseum is just totally removed for Pokemon XD. You're just like this dweeby little kid, just like you are at all the other Pokemon games. So it's not unique at all. You catch way more Pokemon than you do in Pokemon Coliseum, so you have more options. That's a good thing, I guess. But a lot of the Pokemon that you catch are still kind of not ones that you would traditionally probably pick in a typical Pokemon game. Um, they kind of still keep a lot of the same ideas of Pokemon Coliseum, where you're still catching shadow Pokemon and purifying them and all that. And so it just kind of was sort of copying the concept of Pokemon Coliseum and just doing it worse. And just this idea that it's better in any way than Coliseum, just it's mind blowing to me. I really truly cannot think of a single thing other than it makes it easier to purify your Pokemon, I guess, that Pokemon uh, XD does better than Pokemon Coliseum. And they're both gonna be on the Switch, so you can play them both and see for yourself. But yeah, I think Pokemon Coliseum is, I would say, a legitimately strong Pokemon game, a legitimately strong RPG on the GameCube, and of that era, that is super overlooked today. And I'm glad that it's gonna come back to the Switch too, and hopefully more people will have access to it. But I think that it is better than the majority of the Pokemon games that have released in the last decade. And that's kind of sad reflection of where Pokemon is as a franchise, I guess. But I think Pokemon Coliseum is an awesome game that you should check out if you get the chance, especially if you're a Pokemon fan, because it's definitely a unique experience and I think a really strong experience. So that's it. We'll stop the episode here. We have 12 more to get to in the next episode, and these are even or typically really across the board, like even better games than the ones that we've discussed so far. Not across the board, but in a lot of cases. So look forward to that. And if you were a fan of any of these games that I talked about today, or are interested in checking any of them out, then hopefully you appreciated what little awareness I may have been able to bring to them. And if nothing else, at least enjoyed listening to me kiss their asses for a few minutes. So thank you for taking the time to listening to this episode. Despite my lack of gumption lately, there's still plenty more to come from ControlledBurnes in the weeks ahead. We obviously have part 2 of this that we just set up. We have the greatest music series that I need to get back to, Game of Thrones, Andor, Disney Villainous with Reagan, and so much more. So if you're interested in any of that, please stay tuned. Remember, you can write into the show at ControlledBurnes with an ES at gmail.com. And if you like the show, please subscribe, follow, like, review, wherever you listen to your podcast. But for now, and until next time, keep it warm.